I am Delia, 58 years old, and I never imagined that after 2 weeks away visiting my sister, I would return to find my luggage sitting on the doorstep of my own home. The home I had lived in for 30 years. The note taped to my suitcase was in my son Benjamin's handwriting. "Sorry, Mom, no space for you." I stood there, my heart dropping to my stomach, unable to comprehend how my own child could do this to me. Before I tell you how I handled this situation, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you believe family should always come first. 8 years ago, I lost my husband Thomas to cancer. We had been married for 30 years, and his death left a gaping hole in my life. The only comfort I had was our son Benjamin, and the beautiful home we had built together. It was a spacious 2-story colonial, with 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen that opened into a family room, and a beautiful backyard garden that Thomas and I had lovingly tended together. After Thomas passed, I used the life insurance money and our lifetime savings to pay off the mortgage completely. The house became my sanctuary, filled with memories of our life together. Every corner held a story, from the height marks on the kitchen doorframe, tracking Benjamin's growth, to the small dent in the living room wall from when Benjamin was learning to ride his indoor scooter at age 6. Benjamin is 32 now, married to Amelia, who is 30. They have a 5-year-old son, Noah, who is the light of my life. I never thought I could love someone as much as I loved Benjamin, until Noah came along. That little boy with his grandfather's eyes and his father's smile made my heart full again after years of grief. About a year ago, Benjamin called me with news that he had lost his job at the marketing firm where he had worked for 8 years. The company was downsizing, and despite his seniority, he was let go. Amelia worked part-time as an interior designer, but her income wasn't enough to cover their mortgage, car payments, and Noah's preschool tuition. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but would it be possible for us to move in with you temporarily, just until I find another job?" Benjamin asked, his voice strained with embarrassment. "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "This house is too big for just me anyway. I would love to have you all here." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank you, Mom. You have no idea how much this means to us. We promise it won't be for long." Within a week, they had moved in, bringing their essential belongings and putting the rest in storage. I moved out of the master bedroom and down to the guest room on the first floor to give them more space and privacy. The house suddenly felt alive again, with the sound of little feet running down the hallway and Noah's laughter echoing through the rooms. Those first few months were wonderful. We would have family dinners every night, with Benjamin cooking his specialties on weekends. Amelia, despite her initial reluctance to live with her mother-in-law, seemed grateful and often joined me for coffee in the mornings before Noah woke up. We would sit in the kitchen nook, watching the sunrise, and talk about her design projects or Noah's latest achievements at preschool. Noah and I developed a special ritual. Every afternoon we would bake cookies or make simple crafts together. His favorite was making paper airplanes, which we would launch from the upstairs landing to see whose would fly the farthest. "Grandma Delia has magic hands," he would tell his parents. "Her planes always fly the best." There were adjustments, of course. Amelia had different ideas about home decor and slowly began making changes. First, it was just rearranging the furniture in the living room to open up the space. Then she suggested repainting the kitchen from the warm yellow that Thomas and I had chosen to a stark white that she claimed was more contemporary. I felt a pang watching the yellow disappear, but I reminded myself that change was part of life, and that making my family comfortable was more important than clinging to the past. What no one knew was that I had a small apartment in the city about 30 minutes away. I had purchased it 5 years after Thomas died, using some money I had inherited from my parents. It was my private retreat, a place where I could go when I needed space to think or just be alone. I never told Benjamin about it, because I didn't want him to think I was unhappy at home or that I was spending money frivolously. It was simply my little secret, a space that was just mine. As weeks turned into months, I began noticing subtle changes in the dynamics of our household. Benjamin was spending more time away from home, claiming he was networking and interviewing. Amelia began inviting her friends over more frequently, hosting lunch gatherings that I wasn't explicitly invited to, though it was my home. I would often find myself retreating to my room when her friends arrived, feeling oddly out of place in my own house. One evening, I overheard Amelia talking to Benjamin in their bedroom. Their door was ajar, and I was walking past to go downstairs. "Your mother is sweet, but don't you think she hovers too much?" Amelia was saying. "Noah is our child. I feel like she's trying to take over his upbringing." "She means well," Benjamin replied, but his defense sounded weak. "I know, but this house feels like it's still hers. We need to make it our own if we're going to stay here longer." I tiptoed away, my heart heavy. Was I hovering? I tried to be respectful of their parenting decisions and only stepped in when asked. But perhaps I was overstepping without realizing it. The next morning, I announced at breakfast that I was thinking of visiting my sister Martha in Florida for a couple of weeks. "That sounds like a great idea, Mom," Benjamin said, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. "You deserve a break." Amelia smiled brightly. "We'll take good care of the house while you're gone. Don't worry about a thing." And so, with mixed feelings, I packed my bags and headed to Florida, hoping that giving them some space would help ease the growing tension. Little did I know that this decision would change everything. The Florida sunshine was a welcome change from the cooler climate back home. My sister Martha lived in a small but comfortable condo near the beach in St. Petersburg. We had always been close despite the geographic distance between us, and falling back into our sisterly rhythm was easy and comforting. "You look tired, Dee," Martha observed on my second day there, as we sat on her balcony watching the sunset over the Gulf of Mexico. "Is everything okay at home?" I sighed, swirling the ice in my lemonade. "I think so. It's just different having a full house again. Benjamin and Amelia are going through a tough time, and I want to help, but sometimes I feel like I'm in the way." Martha raised an eyebrow. "In the way, in your own house." "It's their home now, too," I explained. "And they need space to be a family." Martha set down her glass with a definitive clink. "Delia, listen to yourself. You've always been too generous, always putting everyone else's needs before your own. It's your house. You paid for it. You maintain it." "I know, but family helps family," I insisted. "Of course they do, but there should be boundaries and respect on both sides." Martha leaned forward. "Have you considered what happens to the house if something happens to you? Does Benjamin assume he'll inherit it?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't really thought about it in concrete terms. I guess I always assumed he would, yes. He's my only child. "Have you put that in writing? Made it official?" "Not exactly. Thomas and I had wills drawn up, but that was before he got sick. Everything went to me when he passed. I haven't updated mine since then." Martha's expression grew concerned. "Delia, you should think about protecting yourself. Maybe talk to a lawyer about setting up a trust or something, especially now that they're living with you." "Benjamin would never try to take advantage of me," I protested, but even as I said it, a small doubt crept into my mind. "I'm sure he wouldn't intentionally," Martha conceded. "But people can rationalize all sorts of things when they're under financial pressure. And you don't really know Amelia that well, do you?" The conversation shifted to other topics, but Martha's questions lingered in my thoughts. That night I called Benjamin to check in and say goodnight to Noah. "How are things going?" I asked after chatting with an excited Noah about a field trip to the fire station. "Great, Mom. Everything's fine here," Benjamin replied, but his voice sounded distant, preoccupied. "Is Amelia there? I wanted to ask her about watering the plants in the sunroom." "She's out with friends. Don't worry about the plants, we've got it covered." Over the next few days, I noticed a pattern. My calls to the house often went unanswered or were cut short. Noah was usually excited to talk to me, but I could sense someone hovering nearby, hurrying him along. Benjamin was increasingly vague about what they were doing, and I hadn't spoken directly to Amelia in days. One evening, when I managed to get Benjamin on the phone, I heard unfamiliar voices and music in the background. "Are you having a party?" I asked, surprised. There was a pause before Benjamin answered. "Just a few friends over for dinner. Nothing major." "That sounds nice. Who's there?" I was genuinely curious, wondering if these were old friends I knew or new acquaintances. "No one you know," he replied quickly. Look, Mom, I need to go. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? The call ended before I could respond. I stared at the phone in my hand, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. Martha noticed my expression. What's wrong? I'm not sure, I admitted. Something feels off. I think I might cut my trip short and head home in a couple of days. Follow your instincts, Martha advised. You know I love having you here, but if you're worried, go home and see what's going on. The night before my scheduled return, I tried calling the house one last time to confirm my arrival time. No one answered. I texted Benjamin. Arriving tomorrow around 2. Can you pick me up from the airport? Hours passed with no response. Finally, I booked a taxi from the airport to the house, telling myself not to overreact. People get busy. Phones die. There could be a simple explanation for the silence. The taxi ride from the airport felt interminable. As we turned onto my street, a sense of homecoming washed over me. No matter what tensions existed, this was my home, my sanctuary. The taxi pulled up to the curb, and I froze. There, neatly arranged on the front porch, were my suitcases and several boxes that I recognized from my bedroom closet. My potted plants from the sunroom were lined up beside them like silent sentinels. With shaking hands, I paid the driver and stepped out. As I approached the porch, I noticed a white envelope taped to my largest suitcase. Inside was a note in Benjamin's handwriting. Mom, we need to talk about some changes. I'm sorry to do this, but we need the space. Call me when you get this and we can figure things out. In the meantime, you should find somewhere else to stay. Sorry, Mom. No space for you. Benjamin. I stood there reading the note over and over, unable to process the words. This couldn't be happening. Not from my son. Not in my own home. I tried the front door only to discover the locks had been changed. The key in my hand no longer fit. I rang the doorbell, but no one came. Through the front windows, I could see that the living room had been completely rearranged. My reading chair was gone, replaced by a modern sectional I had never seen before. The family photos that had lined the mantel had vanished. Standing there on my own porch, locked out of my own home, with my life packed in boxes at my feet, I felt something inside me break. This was betrayal in its purest form, and it had come from the person I trusted most in the world. I sat down heavily on my largest suitcase, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of the situation. The spring afternoon that had seemed so bright and promising just moments ago now felt cold and hostile. My first instinct was to call Benjamin to demand an explanation. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Benjamin, it's Mom. I'm outside the house. Please come talk to me. My voice cracked slightly, but I fought to maintain composure. Next, I tried Amelia's number. To my surprise, she answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice sounded cautious. Amelia, it's Delia. I'm outside the house. What's going on? Why are my things out here, and why has the lock been changed? There was a pause. Then I heard muffled voices, as if she had covered the phone with her hand. In the background, I could hear laughter before the call abruptly ended. The sound of that laughter, casual and unconcerned, while I stood homeless on my own doorstep, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the spring breeze. I tried calling back multiple times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was locked out of my own home, with nowhere to go, and no explanation. As I sat there struggling to process what was happening, I heard a voice call out from next door. Delia, is that you, honey? I looked up to see Nancy Davidson, my neighbor of 20 years, walking across her lawn toward me. Nancy was a retired schoolteacher in her 60s who had been a source of companionship after Thomas died. We often shared coffee and gardening tips over the fence that separated our properties. Nancy, I managed, trying to smile but failing miserably. She took one look at the luggage surrounding me and the stricken expression on my face and immediately understood something was wrong. What on earth is going on? Why are your things out here? I wish I knew, I replied, handing her Benjamin's note. Nancy's face darkened as she read it. This is outrageous. That boy has lost his mind. Come on, you're coming inside my house right now. We'll sort this out. Grateful for her kindness, I followed Nancy to her house, leaving my belongings on the porch for the moment. Once inside, she sat me down at her kitchen table and put on a kettle for tea. Now tell me everything, she insisted, placing a box of tissues within reach. As the tea steeped, I recounted the events leading up to my Florida trip and the increasing distance I had felt from Benjamin and Amelia during my absence. Nancy listened intently, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "There's something you should know," she said, finally cupping her mug between her hands. "While you were gone, there have been some changes." "What kind of changes?" I asked, bracing myself. Nancy sighed deeply. "They've been renovating. Not just redecorating Delia, but actual construction. There were contractors coming and going for days. I assumed you knew about it." I shook my head, stunned. "I had no idea." "And there's more," Nancy continued reluctantly. "Last weekend they had a party, a big one. I could hear the music from my bedroom. I stepped outside to ask them to turn it down a bit, and I overheard Amelia talking to some woman I didn't recognize. She was saying how the house would be theirs soon, that they were finally getting rid of the old lady vibe, now that you had decided to move to Florida permanently." "What?" I gasped. "I never said anything about moving permanently. I didn't think so." Nancy nodded grimly. "But that's what they've been telling people. That you decided Florida was better for your health and that you were signing the house over to them as an early inheritance." The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. Not only had they locked me out of my own home, but they had been systematically erasing my presence and spreading lies about my intentions. "I should call the police," I said, reaching for my phone. Nancy placed a gentle hand on mine. "You could, and you'd be within your rights. But are you sure that's how you want to handle a family matter? Police involvement would mean a scene, reports, possibly charges. Once that line is crossed, it might be hard to repair your relationship with Benjamin and Noah." She was right, of course. Despite everything, Benjamin was still my son, and Noah, my beloved grandson. Taking legal action would escalate the situation to a point of no return. "What do you suggest?" I asked, feeling lost. "First, let's get your immediate needs sorted. You'll stay with me tonight," Nancy declared in her no-nonsense teacher voice. "Then tomorrow we can think about next steps. Do you have someone who can advise you? A lawyer, perhaps?" The mention of a lawyer triggered a memory. Robert Fielding had been Thomas's college roommate and had become our family attorney. He had handled Thomas's will and all our legal matters for decades. He would know what to do. "Yes," I said, feeling a small spark of clarity amidst the chaos. "I know exactly who to call." Nancy squeezed my hand. "Good. Make that call. In the meantime, let's bring your things inside before it gets dark." As we walked back toward my house to retrieve my belongings, I noticed movement at the living room window. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of Noah's little face pressed against the glass, his small hand waving. Then Amelia appeared, yanking him away and closing the curtains with a decisive snap. That small gesture of cruelty, denying a child the chance to greet his grandmother, hardened something inside me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about right and wrong, about teaching my son that actions have consequences, and about showing my grandson that his grandmother would never, ever abandon him. I pulled out my phone and dialed Robert's number. When his receptionist answered, I kept my voice steady and clear. "This is Delia Harrison. I need to speak with Robert as soon as possible. It's an emergency." The next morning, I woke up in Nancy's guest room, momentarily disoriented. For a few blissful seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then reality crashed back, and the weight of betrayal settled heavily on my chest once more. I checked my phone. Still no calls or messages from Benjamin. Nancy had already left for her water aerobics class, leaving me a note saying she would be back around noon and to make myself at home. I appreciated her kindness, but knew I couldn't impose indefinitely. I needed to take action. After a quick shower and borrowing some basic toiletries from Nancy, I made a decision. It was time to go to my apartment in the city, the one place that was truly mine alone. I called a taxi, wrote Nancy a thank you note explaining where I was going, and headed out. 40 minutes later, the taxi pulled up in front of a modest but well-maintained brick building in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city center. I hadn't visited the apartment in nearly 3 months, not since Benjamin and his family had moved in with me. Unlocking the door felt like stepping into another life, one where I was independent and answerable only to myself. The apartment was small but comfortable. One bedroom, a cozy living area, a compact kitchen, and a small balcony overlooking a community garden. It was furnished simply but tastefully, with pieces I had chosen myself, some from estate sales and antique shops that Amelia would have dismissed as dated or fussy. I ran my hand along the spines of books on the shelf, breathing in the faint scent of the lavender sachets I had placed in the drawers before leaving. This space had been my sanctuary, my secret indulgence. Now it would be my base of operations, as I fought to reclaim what was rightfully mine. In the bedroom closet behind a row of hanging clothes was a small safe. I dialed the combination Thomas's birthday and opened it. Inside were my most important documents: birth certificate, marriage license, Thomas's death certificate, and the deed to our house. I also kept emergency cash here, about $5,000, that Thomas had always insisted we maintain, just in case. I spread the documents on the dining table and began reviewing them. The house was solely in my name. After Thomas died, I had refinanced to remove his name from the mortgage, which I had subsequently paid off entirely. There was no question about ownership. The house was mine legally and morally. I also found a folder containing the most recent version of my will, which indeed left everything to Benjamin upon my death. Martha had been right to question me about this. In my current situation, this arrangement seemed dangerously naive. At 2 o'clock, I had a scheduled call with Robert. I had briefly explained the situation to him yesterday, and he had asked for time to review my documents before advising me. When my phone rang, I answered immediately. "Delia, I've been thinking about your situation, and I'd like to meet in person," Robert said after our initial greetings. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning at 10? "Of course," I agreed. "But Robert, can you tell me now, am I at risk of losing my house?" "Based on what you've told me, absolutely not," he assured me. "Without your signature on a deed transfer, the house remains yours. But there are concerning elements here that we should discuss face to face. In the meantime, I'd suggest checking your financial accounts to make sure everything is as it should be." After hanging up, I did exactly that. Logging into my bank account, I reviewed the recent transactions. Most seemed normal, but there were several large withdrawals over the past 2 weeks that I hadn't made. One for $3,000, another for $2,500, both made at ATMs. I had never given Benjamin access to my accounts, but he knew where I kept my spare debit card in case of emergencies, and he certainly knew my PIN. It was his birthday. My hands shook with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just opportunistic. This was calculated theft. How could the sweet boy who had once made me handmade Mother's Day cards now steal from me while I was away? Driven by a need to understand the extent of the betrayal, I began searching online for information about Benjamin and Amelia. What I found shocked me even further. Benjamin's name appeared on a local newspaper's website in an article about a charity casino night. The accompanying photo showed him at a poker table surrounded by chips. The article mentioned him as a regular on the local poker circuit. Poker circuit? Benjamin had never mentioned gambling to me. Was this where our money was going? Further searching revealed Amelia's Instagram account, which was public. Scrolling through her recent posts, I saw photos of new furniture in my house, expensive shopping bags from luxury stores, and a sparkling tennis bracelet captioned, "Early birthday present from the best hubby ever." The timestamp showed it was purchased just days after I left for Florida, right around when the first large withdrawal was made from my account. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was ugly. Benjamin had gambling debts. Amelia had expensive tastes. They needed money and saw my house, my home, as the solution. With me out of the way, they could sell it and solve their financial problems. The betrayal cut so deep it left me breathless. I sat back in my chair staring at the images on my screen through tears of hurt and anger. I thought about the boxes of keepsakes I had saved from Benjamin's childhood report cards, art projects, birthday cards he had made for me with wobbly handwriting and too much glitter. In one of those boxes was a Father's Day card he had made in second grade the year after Thomas died. Inside he had written, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll always take care of you like Dad did." Where was that boy now? How had he become this stranger who would steal from his own mother and lock her out of her home? I pulled out a small album I kept in my apartment, flipping through photos of Benjamin growing up. His first day of kindergarten gap-toothed and nervous. His high school graduation tall and proud in his cap and gown. His wedding day beaming at Amelia as if she hung the moon. Noah's birth. Benjamin holding his newborn son, with wonder and terror in his eyes. I traced the outline of his face in the most recent photo I had taken at Christmas. There was tension around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before, a tightness to his smile. Had the signs been there all along, and I had been too blind to see them? With a heavy heart, I closed the album and reached for my phone. It was time to take back control of my life, starting with my finances. I called my bank and reported the unauthorized transactions, then requested that all my cards be canceled and replaced. I also asked about changing my accounts entirely, moving them to a different bank, where Benjamin would have no way of accessing them. Next, I called the locksmith who had worked on my apartment. I explained that I needed to regain access to my house after being locked out. He asked if I could provide proof of ownership, which I assured him I could. We arranged for him to meet me at the house the following afternoon. Finally, I called Nancy to update her and thank her again for her help. "I'm staying at my apartment for now," I told her. "I have a meeting with my lawyer tomorrow morning, then I'm having a locksmith meet me at the house to change the locks back." "Do you want me to be there with you?" Nancy offered. "For moral support?" I considered it. Having a witness might be wise, but this confrontation needed to happen between me and my son. "Thank you, but I think this is something I need to do alone. Could you just keep an eye out and call me if you see them leave? I'd prefer to have the locks changed while they're out." "Of course, honey. And Delia, you're doing the right thing. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for our children is to show them that actions have consequences." That night I hardly slept. My mind raced with memories, questions, and plans. By morning, exhaustion had crystallized into resolve. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that Thomas had always said made me look formidable, applied my makeup with precision, and headed to Robert's office. The meeting was both reassuring and alarming. Robert confirmed that legally, my position was secure. The house was mine. No valid transfer of ownership had occurred. However, he showed me a document that had been submitted to the county recorder's office just 3 days ago, a quitclaim deed purportedly transferring ownership from me to Benjamin. The signature was a poor imitation of mine. "This is forgery," Robert stated flatly, his expression grave. "A criminal offense." The implications were staggering. Not only had Benjamin locked me out of my home and stolen from my accounts, but he had attempted to fraudulently transfer ownership through forgery. This went beyond family dysfunction into criminal territory. "What do you recommend?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. Robert leaned forward, his hands clasped on his desk. "We have several options ranging from gentle to severe. We could start with a formal letter demanding access to your property and acknowledgement of your ownership. We could file for an emergency injunction to prevent any sale or further modification of the property. Or given the forgery attempt, we could involve law enforcement." The thought of having Benjamin arrested made my stomach turn despite everything. "Let's start with regaining access," I decided. "I'm meeting a locksmith this afternoon. Once I'm back in the house, I want to arrange a formal meeting with Benjamin and Amelia with you present. They need to understand the seriousness of their actions and what's at stake." Robert nodded. "A measured approach. I agree. But Delia, you should be prepared for hostility and resistance. What they've done indicates a level of desperation that might make them unpredictable." "I understand," I said, though my heart ached at the thought. "But they're still my family. I need to give them a chance to make this right before taking more drastic steps." As I left Robert's office clutching a folder of legal documents affirming my ownership and rights, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since finding my belongings on the porch, I felt a sense of purpose and direction. It was time to face my son and reclaim what was mine, not just my house, but my dignity and self-respect. The woman who had raised Benjamin to be honest and kind would now have to teach him one final painful lesson: that love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be used and discarded when convenient. The sun was setting by the time I parked across the street from my house, casting long shadows across the familiar facade. Nancy had texted earlier to let me know that Benjamin and Amelia had left with Noah about an hour ago, presumably for dinner. The locksmith had come and gone, replacing the locks and giving me a new set of keys. Now I sat in my car, gathering my courage for what lay ahead. The house looked different somehow. New curtains hung in the front windows, and the potted geraniums that I had planted on the porch steps had been replaced with modern-looking ornamental grasses. Even from outside, I could see that the warm yellow light I had always preferred had been swapped for harsher, brighter bulbs. Taking a deep breath, I crossed the street and walked up the path to my front door. The new key turned smoothly in the lock, and I stepped inside, bracing myself for what I might find. The interior was almost unrecognizable. The warm, traditional decor that Thomas and I had chosen over years together had been replaced with a stark, minimalist aesthetic that felt cold and impersonal. My antique writing desk passed down from my grandmother was gone from its place by the window. In its stead stood a sleek glass console table holding a large, abstract sculpture that I had never seen before. Moving through the house in a daze, I cataloged the changes. The family photos that had lined the staircase wall had vanished, replaced by black and white architectural prints. My collection of vintage teacups, carefully curated over decades, was nowhere to be seen. Even the kitchen had been transformed with new stainless steel appliances and quartz countertops, replacing the warm wooden surfaces I had loved. It wasn't just redecorating, it was erasure. Every trace of me of the life Thomas and I had built had been systematically removed. It felt like walking through a stranger's house or a model home staged for sale, devoid of history or personal warmth. I made my way upstairs, pausing outside Noah's room. Opening the door quietly, I was relieved to see that at least this space retained some familiarity. His twin bed with the rocket ship comforter I had given him for Christmas still sat against the wall. His stuffed animals, including the worn teddy bear that had once belonged to Benjamin, were arranged on a shelf. On his bedside table stood a framed photo of Noah and me baking cookies together, one of the few personal images I had seen so far. Sitting on the edge of Noah's bed, I picked up the photo, tracing my grandson's smiling face with my finger. Whatever happened next, I had to make sure Noah understood that none of this was his fault, and that my love for him would never change. The sound of a car door slamming jolted me from my thoughts. Through Noah's window I could see Benjamin's SUV in the driveway. They were back earlier than I had expected. Setting down the photo, I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and prepared to face my son. I walked downstairs and positioned myself in the living room, standing tall despite the alien surroundings. The front door opened, and I heard Noah's excited chatter, Amelia's laugh, and Benjamin's low response. Then silence, as they registered my presence. "Grandma!" Noah broke the stillness, running toward me with arms outstretched. I knelt to hug him, holding him tightly, breathing in the scent of his hair. "What are you doing here?" Benjamin's voice was cold, unrecognizable. He stood in the entryway, keys still in hand, as if ready to flee. Beside him, Amelia's face had hardened into a mask of hostility. "I live here," I replied, simply rising to my feet, but keeping a hand on Noah's shoulder. "This is my home." "How did you get in?" Amelia demanded, her voice shrill. "We changed the locks." "Yes, I noticed that when I returned from my trip to find my belongings on the porch and a note telling me I no longer had a place in my own home." I said, my tone level but firm. "So I had the locks changed back, as is my right as the legal owner of this property." Benjamin stepped forward, his face flushing. Mom, we need to talk about this rationally. The situation has changed. We've made this our home now, invested in renovations. Without my knowledge or consent, I interrupted. In a house that is legally mine, while stealing money from my accounts and attempting to forge my signature on property transfer documents. Benjamin paled at this, his eyes darting to Amelia, who glared back at him as if warning him to stay silent. "Noah, honey," Amelia said suddenly, her voice artificially sweet. "Go upstairs and play in your room for a bit while the grown-ups talk." "But I want to stay with Grandma," Noah protested, clinging to my hand. "Now, Noah," Amelia snapped, causing the little boy to jump. He looked up at me with confused eyes. I bent down to his level. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go on up to your room for a little while. I'll come see you before I leave." As soon as Noah was out of earshot, Amelia's demeanor changed completely. "You have no right to barge in here," she hissed. "We've made this our home now. You were perfectly happy in Florida with your sister." "I was visiting for 2 weeks," I corrected her. At no point did I indicate I was moving permanently or giving up my home. "Mom," Benjamin interjected, his voice placating. "You have to understand our situation. We need this house. We can't afford our own place right now, and with Noah starting school soon, we need stability. And that justifies locking me out of my own home, stealing from my accounts, attempting to forge property transfer documents." I kept my voice low but intense. "Do you have any idea how serious these actions are, Benjamin? This goes beyond family disagreement into criminal territory." For the first time, a flicker of shame crossed Benjamin's face. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he mumbled. "We just needed some time to sort things out." "It was your idea," Amelia rounded on him. "Don't try to play innocent now. You said your mother would understand once it was done, that she'd forgive you like she always does." The words struck like physical blows. Was that how Benjamin saw me? As a pushover who would forgive any transgression? Had my unconditional love been mistaken for weakness? "I've spoken with my attorney," I said, keeping my composure despite the pain. "The house remains legally mine. No valid transfer has occurred, and the attempted forgery has been flagged with the county recorder's office." "You're bluffing," Amelia scoffed. "You wouldn't take legal action against your own son." "I've already frozen my accounts and reported the unauthorized withdrawals," I continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I've also instructed my attorney to draft new estate planning documents that reflect the current situation." Benjamin's face crumpled slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means that unless things change dramatically, you are no longer my sole heir, Benjamin. It means that my assets, including this house, will be placed in a trust that protects them from being seized or misused." The color drained from his face. "Mom, you can't be serious. Where would that leave Noah?" "Noah will be well provided for," I assured him, "but through mechanisms that ensure the resources are used for his benefit, not squandered." Amelia stepped forward aggressively. "This is ridiculous. You're an old woman. You don't need all this space. We have a family to raise. You should be grateful we're willing to take care of this place instead of letting it fall apart around you." "Amelia," Benjamin cautioned, but she was too far gone. "No, I'm tired of pretending your mother has been in the way from day one. She hovers over Noah, questions my parenting, keeps this place like a museum to your dead father. We deserve to make our own life our own home. She should be in a retirement community or something, not taking up space here." The raw hostility in her voice stunned me. I had known there was tension, but I had never imagined such resentment simmering beneath the surface. "I think I understand now," I said quietly, looking directly at Benjamin, whose eyes were now fixed on the floor. "This isn't just about financial need, is it? This is about what you want versus what you're willing to work for. It's about taking shortcuts instead of earning your way." "You don't understand," Benjamin muttered. "The gambling, it got out of hand. I owe people money." "So you decided to solve your problems by stealing from me instead of asking for help." I shook my head, disappointment overwhelming me. The Benjamin I raised would never have done that. "Well, maybe I'm not the perfect son you thought I was," he burst out suddenly, years of unspoken resentment bubbling to the surface. Maybe I'm tired of living up to the legacy of St. Thomas and trying to be the man of the house since I was 24. Maybe I wanted something that was just mine for once, not handed down or supervised by you. The outburst hung in the air between us, raw and painful. For the first time, I glimpsed the weight my son had been carrying, the pressure to fill his father's shoes, the resentment at feeling perpetually like a child in my eyes. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped me understand them. "Benjamin," I said softly, "if that's how you felt, you should have talked to me. We could have found a solution together as a family. Instead, you chose deception and theft." Before he could respond, we heard small footsteps on the stairs. Noah appeared, clutching his teddy bear, eyes wide. "Is Grandma going away again?" he asked in a small voice. "No, sweetheart, I'm not going far," I assured him, moving to the stairs and kneeling down. "I have my own place nearby, and you can visit me any time." "I want to go with you," Noah declared, throwing his arms around my neck. "Noah, come here right now," Amelia commanded sharply. Noah clung tighter. "No, I want to stay with Grandma." "She's not part of our family anymore," Amelia snapped, storming over to pull Noah away from me. The look of confusion and hurt on my grandson's face as his mother dragged him away broke something inside me. This had gone beyond a dispute over property. It was now harming the most innocent person involved. "That's enough," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "This situation is untenable. Here's what's going to happen. I am reclaiming my house, as is my legal right. However, I recognize that immediate eviction would be disruptive for Noah. So I'm offering you a choice." I turned to face Benjamin directly. "You can either agree to meet with me and my attorney tomorrow to discuss a formal arrangement for your continued residence here with clear boundaries and expectations, or you can start looking for new accommodation immediately." "You can't just throw us out," Amelia protested. "We have rights as tenants." "Actually, you don't," I corrected her. "You've never paid rent, there's no lease agreement, and you've engaged in illegal activities including theft and forgery. But I'm not interested in a legal battle. I'm interested in finding a solution that protects everyone, especially Noah." Benjamin looked torn, glancing between his wife and me. Finally, he said, "We'll meet with your lawyer." "Fine." I nodded. 10 o'clock tomorrow at Robert Fielding's office. In the meantime, I'll be staying at my apartment. And Benjamin, I suggest you think very carefully about what kind of man you want your son to see you as." With that, I walked toward the door, pausing only to gently touch Noah's cheek. "I love you, sweetheart. Always remember that." As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I heard Noah calling after me, his voice small and confused. "Grandma, don't go." It took every ounce of strength I had not to turn around, not to run back and gather him in my arms. But I kept walking, tears streaming down my face, knowing that sometimes the hardest decisions are the most necessary ones. Behind me, I heard Benjamin's voice. "Mom needs to start a new life now. We need this house more than she does." Those words, spoken to a 5-year-old who couldn't possibly understand their implications, cemented my resolve. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about teaching my son and grandson about integrity, consequences, and the true meaning of family. With a heavy heart but straightened shoulders, I got into my car and drove away from the home I had loved for 30 years, uncertain if I would ever return to live there again. But one thing was certain: I would never again allow myself to be discarded or taken advantage of, even by those I loved most in the world. The morning of the meeting dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the emotional storm I was weathering. I had barely slept, my mind racing with memories, regrets, and plans. By the time I arrived at Robert's office, I was operating on adrenaline and determination alone. Robert greeted me with a supportive handshake and ushered me into the conference room. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his kind eyes searching my face for signs of wavering. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, setting my purse on the polished table and taking a seat. "Have you prepared the documents we discussed?" Robert nodded, opening his briefcase to reveal several neatly organized folders. "Everything's here: the property ownership confirmation, the police report regarding the unauthorized bank withdrawals, the documentation of the attempted forgery, and the draft agreement for continued occupancy with conditions. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "And you contacted Martha as I asked?" "Yes, she's on standby for a video call if we need her input or support," he confirmed. The door opened, and Robert's assistant announced the arrival of Benjamin and Amelia. When they walked in, I was struck by how different they looked from the day before. Benjamin appeared haggard with dark circles under his eyes and his usually neat hair uncombed. Amelia, typically polished and put together, seemed subdued, her face free of makeup and her posture less confrontational. "Thank you for coming," Robert began formally after introductions were made. "We're here to discuss a serious situation regarding the property at 1542 Maple Avenue and related financial matters. Before we begin, I want to be clear that Mrs. Harrison has engaged my services to protect her legal interests, but she has expressed a desire to find an amicable resolution if possible." Benjamin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Where's Noah today?" I asked, noticing his absence. "With my mother," Amelia replied curtly. "We didn't think this was an appropriate place for him." I nodded, relieved that at least we could speak freely without worrying about upsetting Noah further. "Let me outline the situation as it stands." Robert continued, his tone professional but firm. "The property in question is legally owned solely by Delia Harrison. There has been no valid transfer of ownership. The document submitted to the county recorder's office purporting to transfer ownership to Benjamin Harrison has been identified as fraudulent with a forged signature." Benjamin winced visibly at these words, while Amelia stared stonily ahead. "Additionally," Robert went on, "there have been unauthorized withdrawals from Mrs. Harrison's bank accounts totaling approximately $5,500 over the past 3 weeks. These transactions have been reported to the bank and to local law enforcement." "It was a loan," Benjamin interjected weakly. "I was going to pay it back." "A loan requires the lender's knowledge and consent," Robert pointed out. "Mrs. Harrison was not informed or consulted about these withdrawals." Amelia suddenly leaned forward. "Look, we know we made mistakes, but you have to understand our situation. Benjamin lost his job. I can only get part-time design work, and we have Noah to think about. We were desperate." "I understand financial pressure," I said, speaking for the first time. "What I don't understand is why you didn't come to me honestly. I've always been willing to help." "Because you always make us feel like children when you help," Benjamin burst out. "It's never just help. It comes with strings and expectations and judgment." His words stung, but I forced myself to consider them objectively. Had I been overbearing in my assistance? Had I made Benjamin feel inadequate when I was only trying to support him? "That was never my intention," I said carefully. "But even if you felt that way, it doesn't justify what you did." "We know," Benjamin admitted, his voice smaller now. I got in over my head with some poker games. I thought I could win enough to solve our problems, but it just got worse. And then Amelia's friend told us about how her parents had transferred their house to her early to avoid estate taxes, and it seemed like a solution. So you decided to forge my signature rather than ask me directly." Benjamin couldn't meet my eyes. "I thought you might say no, or make us go to financial counseling or something before agreeing. We didn't have time for that." Robert cleared his throat. "The severity of these actions cannot be overstated. Forgery is a criminal offense that carries potential jail time. Unauthorized bank access is also a serious matter. Mrs. Harrison would be well within her rights to pursue criminal charges." Fear flashed across Benjamin's face. "Mom, you wouldn't—" "I don't want to," I interrupted. "You're my son, Benjamin. Despite everything, I love you. But love doesn't mean allowing harmful behavior to continue without consequences." I nodded to Robert, who opened one of his folders and placed a document in front of Benjamin and Amelia. "Mrs. Harrison is proposing the following arrangement," Robert explained. "You may continue to live in the house under specific conditions. First, you will repay the money taken from her accounts according to this payment schedule. Second, both of you will attend financial counseling, and Benjamin will participate in gambling addiction treatment. Third, The house will be placed in a trust for Noah's benefit with Mrs. Harrison as trustee until he turns 25. Amelia's head snapped up. So we'll never own it, after all the work we've put into renovating. Renovations you undertook without permission on property you did not own, Robert reminded her gently. But yes, the ownership will transfer directly to Noah when he's of age, bypassing both of you. This protects the asset from potential creditors or financial mismanagement. And if we refuse, Amelia challenged. Robert's expression remained neutral. Then Mrs. Harrison will proceed with eviction and consider pressing criminal charges for the forgery and theft. The conference room fell silent as Benjamin and Amelia absorbed the terms. I watched their faces, trying to gauge their reactions. Benjamin looked defeated, but also somewhat relieved, as if a weight had been lifted now that everything was out in the open. Amelia, however, seemed to be calculating, her eyes narrowed as she mentally assessed their options. There's one more thing, I added, my voice softer now. This isn't just about legal arrangements. This is about rebuilding trust. I want to have a relationship with my son and grandson, but that requires honesty and respect on both sides. Benjamin looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time that day. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I never meant for things to get so out of control. I could see the boy I raised in that moment, vulnerable, remorseful, capable of growth. I believe you, I said, and I'm willing to work on this relationship if you are. What about me? Amelia interjected. Am I just supposed to accept being cut out of any ownership stake in our home? It was never your home to begin with, I replied evenly. But yes, if you want to continue living there, these are the terms. The alternative is finding your own housing and potentially dealing with legal consequences. Amelia opened her mouth to argue further, but Benjamin placed a hand on her arm. Amelia, please. We need to think about what's best for Noah. And I need help with the gambling. I know that now. Something in his admission seemed to deflate her anger. She sat back, arms crossed, but no longer combative. Fine, we'll think about it. I'm afraid this isn't an open-ended offer, Robert interjected. Mrs. Harrison needs your decision by the end of the week. And in the meantime, Benjamin asked. In the meantime, I'll stay at my apartment, I said. But I would like to see Noah regularly. He's confused and upset by all of this, and he deserves some stability. I can bring him to the park tomorrow afternoon, Benjamin offered. Maybe for an hour or so. It was a small concession, but it felt like the first step toward healing. I'd like that. I nodded. As the meeting concluded and we all stood to leave, Benjamin hesitated, then stepped toward me. Mom, I don't know how things got so messed up. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, I said, and I meant it. We all make mistakes, Benjamin. The measure of a person isn't in never failing, but in how they respond when they do. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes, then turned quickly and followed Amelia out the door. After they left, Robert turned to me. You handled that remarkably well. Many people in your position would have been far less generous. He's still my son, I said simply, and Noah needs his father. Punishing Benjamin severely might satisfy some need for justice, but it wouldn't help heal our family. Robert smiled kindly. Thomas would be proud of you, Delia. He always said you were the strongest person he knew, even if you didn't see it yourself. His words warmed me, reminding me of the man who had loved me unconditionally for 30 years. Thomas had always believed in my strength even when I doubted it. Perhaps it was time I fully believed in it too. As I left the office and stepped into the sunshine, I felt lighter somehow. The path ahead was uncertain and would undoubtedly include more difficult conversations and painful moments. But for the first time since finding my belongings on the porch, I felt hopeful. Not just about potentially resolving the housing situation, but about reclaiming my sense of self. In trying to take my home, Benjamin and Amelia had inadvertently given me something precious, the realization that I was more than just Benjamin's mother or Thomas's widow. I was Delia Harrison, a woman of courage and compassion, capable of standing up for herself while still extending grace to others. Whatever happened next, I would face it not as a victim, but as the architect of my own life. 6 months later, I sat on a bench in Jefferson Park, watching Noah chase a soccer ball across the grass. His laughter carried on the autumn breeze, pure and uninhibited. Beside me, Gloria sipped her coffee, her silvery hair catching the sunlight. "He's growing like a weed," Gloria observed. "Must be a good 6 inches taller than when I first met him." I smiled, nodding in agreement. Gloria had become an unexpected blessing in my life, a friend who understood precisely what I was going through, because she had weathered a similar storm with her own daughter years earlier. We had met at a support group for older adults facing family estrangement and financial abuse, and our weekly coffee dates had become a cornerstone of my new life. "Benjamin's bringing him to stay with me this weekend," I shared. "They're making progress on the renovations to the basement apartment." After our meeting with Robert, Benjamin and Amelia had ultimately agreed to the terms I had proposed, with one modification that had been Benjamin's idea. Instead of my continuing to live separately in my city apartment, they would convert the basement of the house into a private apartment for me. I would have my own entrance kitchen and living space, but would still be close enough to be part of Noah's daily life. The arrangement wasn't perfect, and there had been plenty of bumps along the way. Amelia had initially resisted the idea, seeing it as an invasion of her space. Benjamin had struggled with the gambling addiction treatment, relapsing once before recommitting to the program with greater determination. And I had found it challenging to maintain boundaries while living so close to them, fighting the ingrained impulse to step in and fix things when I saw them struggling. But slowly, painfully, we were finding a new equilibrium. Benjamin had secured a job at a marketing firm, not as senior as his previous position, but stable and with room for growth. Amelia had expanded her interior design business, channeling her creativity in more positive ways. And I had discovered a passion for volunteering at the local library's literacy program, helping adults learn to read, a pursuit that was entirely my own, separate from my identity as mother and grandmother. "Have you finalized the trust documents?" Gloria asked, knowing how important this piece had been to me. "Yes, last week," I confirmed. "The house is now officially in a trust for Noah, with me as primary trustee and my sister Martha as backup. Benjamin and Amelia can live there as long as they maintain the property and keep up with their financial obligations, but the asset is protected." "And how do you feel about everything now?" Gloria's question was gentle, but probing. I watched Noah for a moment before answering. "Grateful," I said finally. "Not for what happened that was painful and unnecessary, but for what I learned through it. I discovered strength I didn't know I had. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. And I found out who I am beyond just being Benjamin's mother." Gloria nodded, understanding in her eyes. "It's a hard lesson, but a valuable one. Some people never learn it." "I just wish—" I hesitated, old guilt surfacing. "I wish I had done a better job teaching Benjamin about money and responsibility. Maybe then he wouldn't have turned to gambling, wouldn't have felt so desperate." "You can't take responsibility for his choices," Gloria reminded me firmly. "You gave him values, education, love. What he did with those gifts was up to him. And remember, he's changing now. That speaks to the foundation you gave him." She was right, of course. Benjamin was making an effort. Our weekly family dinners, once tense and awkward, had gradually become more relaxed. He had apologized multiple times, not just in words, but in actions, helping me move my things from the apartment, respecting my boundaries, engaging genuinely with the financial counseling process. Amelia remained more distant, but even she had thawed somewhat. Last week, she had asked for my opinion on curtains for Noah's room, a small gesture that nonetheless signaled a willingness to include me. Noah blessedly had bounced back with the resilience of childhood. Once the adults in his life had stopped fighting and established a new normal, he had adapted quickly. Having me in the basement apartment meant he could visit whenever he wanted within reasonable hours, and our bond had only strengthened. "Grandma, watch this," Noah called, attempting to bounce the soccer ball on his knee. It promptly rolled away, but he beamed with pride at his effort. "Amazing, sweetheart," I called back, clapping enthusiastically. My phone chimed with a text message. It was from Benjamin. Dinner's still on for tonight. I made Dad's lasagna recipe. Not as good as yours, but getting better. I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. These small moments of connection, of shared memories and new beginnings, were healing us all in ways I hadn't thought possible 6 months ago. You know, Gloria said thoughtfully, watching me respond to the text, what happened to you was terrible, but how you responded to it was remarkable. You stood your ground without burning bridges. That's wisdom, Delia. Her words warmed me. I had good support, I acknowledged, squeezing her hand gratefully. You, Martha, Nancy, Robert, you all helped me find my way through the darkest moments. But you did the hard work, she insisted. You faced the pain, set boundaries, offered forgiveness without being a doormat. You should be proud of yourself. Noah came running over, flushed and happy. Grandma, can we get ice cream, please? What does your dad say? I asked, maintaining the parental hierarchy we had worked to establish. He said to ask you because you're in charge today, Noah replied promptly. I laughed. Then yes, ice cream it is. Want to come, Gloria? As the three of us walked toward the ice cream stand, Noah skipping ahead, Gloria linked her arm through mine. So what's next for Delia Harrison? Now that the housing situation is settled and family relations are improving? I considered her question. For so long my life had been defined by others, wife to Thomas, mother, to Benjamin, grandmother, to Noah. The crisis had forced me to rediscover myself as an individual, and I was still exploring what that meant. I'm thinking about taking that Mediterranean cruise Martha has been suggesting, I confided. 2 weeks exploring Greece and Italy, just for me. That sounds wonderful, Gloria encouraged. You deserve it. And I've been talking to the library about expanding my volunteer hours, maybe developing a program specifically for senior citizens who want to improve their reading skills. Look at you, Gloria smiled, building a life that's truly yours. Her words resonated deeply. That was exactly what I was doing, creating a life that honored my roles as mother and grandmother, while also nurturing my individual needs and interests. It wasn't selfish, it was necessary and healthy. Later that evening, as we gathered around the dinner table in what was once again feeling like a home, I looked at my small family. Benjamin serving the slightly overcooked lasagna with pride. Amelia setting out a salad she had prepared. Noah chattering about his day at school. There was still healing to be done, trust to be rebuilt, patterns to be changed. But we were trying, all of us, in our imperfect ways. When Noah asked me to tell him a story about his grandfather before bed, I sat on the edge of his bed and shared the tale of how Thomas and I had first met, a story of young love mistakes, made lessons learned, and a lifetime of choosing each other every day, despite the challenges. The most important thing your grandfather taught me, I told Noah as his eyelids grew heavy, was that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to help them be their best self, even when that's difficult. Like when Dad had to go to those special meetings to stop playing poker, Noah asked sleepily. Exactly like that, I confirmed, smoothing his hair. I love your dad enough to want him to be healthy and happy, even if the path to get there was hard. I love you, Grandma, Noah murmured, drifting toward sleep. I love you too, my sweet boy. Always and forever. As I closed his door softly behind me, I found Benjamin waiting in the hallway. Thank you, he said simply. For everything. For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I reached up to touch his cheek, this man who would always be my little boy, in some corner of my heart. Family doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior, I told him. It means caring enough to establish boundaries and hold each other accountable. It took me too long to learn that, but I'm glad I finally did. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'm trying to be someone Noah can be proud of. Someone you can be proud of again. I am proud of you, I assured him. Not because you're perfect, none of us are, but because you're doing the hard work of growing and changing. Walking down to my apartment later, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The journey had been painful, the betrayal deep, but the outcome was a family that was more honest, more resilient, and ultimately healthier than before. Sometimes when a door closes in your life, it isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a new chapter one where you find the courage to stand up for yourself while still offering compassion to those who have hurt you. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not in endless giving, but in teaching others to respect your worth and dignity. This is the wisdom I carry forward, the lesson I hope Noah will learn as he watches the adults in his life navigate this new path together. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? How did you balance maintaining your self-respect with offering forgiveness? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, you are worthy of respect, even from those closest to you. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you courage and wisdom on your own path forward.